As we are already slightly struggling with time, I will move straight to our first panel, which will look at digital investment and transformation. And I will ask you to kindly stay on, as several of the points that you raised will come up in the questions. So we'll be discussing the data and outlook with Barbara Sala, the Central and Eastern Europe Strategic Connection and Media Director for the Coca-Cola Company, with Daniel Bischoff, Chief Marketing and Operations Officer of RTL AdConnect, and with Ian Edwards, Communications Planning Director for Facebook. A warm welcome to you all. Thank you so much for being with us today. And I will start off with some first comments. There was a lot of information to take in there from Daniel, evidently. However, especially regarding the forecasts that Daniel made, I would be very intrigued to hear from you a first take, a first comment on the data and the outlook. Barbara, perhaps I could start with you. Good morning, and thank you for being with us, Barbara.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. So, yeah, I think that Daniel's speech was really to the point, and it's not only making a clear picture of what was in the previous month, but also about what will happen in the coming month. So it's a matter of fact that it has been a very let me say, hard moment for us, and especially for Coca-Cola, for example. We took a quite bold and absolutely conscious, by the way, decision to go dark in the last 2 months. And so it's very hard also to make any kind of forecast, to be honest, because very much will depend on what will happen in the second half of this year, when our customers are going to reopen, and we are supporting them in this reopening with support also in the digital space. But what I can for sure agree 100% with Daniel is that the digital recovery will be faster for sure than the traditional one, because it has been proven in this month that digital has been really very much able to immediately, real time, reach our consumers, reach people, and to talk with them in many different forms, of which some of them really astonished me, like real-time content production and streaming and distribution. That is something that I think the brands will have to look at in the very near future. But yes, for sure, digital, and especially some part of it, will react much faster than the rest of the advertising spending.
Thank you, Barbara. Now, as we have two Daniels in the panel, I will split them into Daniel B and Daniel K, so I don't have to say the entire surnames. So, Daniel B, a first comment from you.
Hi, Constantine, and thanks for having us in this great panel. And Daniel K, thanks for the great presentation up front. I think it's always great in order to understand the present and the future, to look at the past. And having the 2019 data up front helps a lot also, I think, to understand what will happen in 2021 and following years. Looking at the presentation from Daniel, I think there are a couple of points that intrigued me personally and from my point of view. So first of all, looking at the 2019, I think what resonates with our experience at RTL is that video is really the driver for digital investments. And looking at the growth rates of 30% in 2019 for video, in-stream video is really the driver for quality digital investments, I would say. And a trend that we saw already in 2019 is let's say, a deviation between high quality premium environments and commodity in digital. And I think the crisis and the current situation is accelerating and amplifying this trend, meaning that the gap between high premium, high quality, transparent, brand safe video and a commodity will increase, a commodity digital inventory. So I think that this trend is definitely something that we will see going forward, and being accelerated and amplified by the current situation. The other thing that I found very interesting is that the inability to compare this crisis actually with previous crises, and the question on what are the structural changes that will stay after this immediate drop and probably relatively sudden return in digital. We saw in the data from Daniel that banner display is something where the recovery is not going to be immediate. And that also aligns with what we see in terms of video being the driver of the digital growth. So there are a couple of points I think, that are very interesting to observe at the moment, although it's a terrible situation for publishers, for brands, for everybody locked at home. But it will give us a good idea of what are the structural changes that we'll see in the upcoming years to come, and they have been accelerated, I'm pretty sure.
Thank you for these remarks, Daniel. And actually, I will be coming back to the video point because, indeed, as you said, there has been some distinct and very interesting change. A comment from Ian. Your first take on what we heard, Ian, and particularly regarding the outlook for the near future.
Yeah, hi, hello everyone, and yeah, it's great to be here. And Daniel K, thank you so much for such an insightful presentation. A part that really jumped out to me, which is something you touched on around how this recession that we're inevitably going to face started as a supply challenge, a distribution challenge for marketeers to get their products and services into people's hands, and that may well move into a demand-based recession if we see economic downturn. But what I think is really interesting for the outlook is the fact that, unlike any other recession that has gone before, is just the profound change to consumer behaviour, particularly around the digital space, and particularly around how people have had to get products into their hands. And we've had an education, a global education of huge new audiences and businesses that have had to try to pivot and reach their consumers through digital. And I think as we look to the future, the transformation and the digital supply chain for how products are distributed, the changes that we've seen over the last 10, 12 weeks have been greater than we've seen over the last 10 to 20 years. Before we entered this crisis, e-commerce was around 20% of retail sales, and that grew 1 percentage point per year for 20 years. In 10 weeks, we saw that grow to 30%, so 1 percentage point a week. And that fundamental shift in consumer behavior and that education of consumers about how to use digital to access resources, to access products and services, I think is going to be absolutely critical to the recovery. And I think digital, broadly speaking, is in a very good position to help brands and advertisers connect with their consumers in new ways and accelerate that trend.
Thank you, Ian. And yes, Daniel K, I will not be taking a comment from you now because asking you to comment on your comments might be a bit self-centered. So I would like to move on because there's a lot of points that have been raised in terms of how social has been doing, mobile, overtaking desktop, video being at 1/3 of display and so on. And I was particularly intrigued also with Barbara's comment about, and yours, about the elasticity of digital, because this is elasticity. The turn on, turn off, the first one to go, but the first one to dynamically rebound is an elasticity point in the end more than anything else. But I want to ask a question specifically from Barbara and Daniel K. Perhaps you can comment on that. I heard loud and clear what was your decision during the preceding months. And of course, the Coca-Cola company is one of the world's top advertisers. So we follow what you guys do very, very closely. I wanted just to hear more in terms of your outlook and how you see re-engaging again with your consumers worldwide, and what is likely to be your strategic orientation in terms of, say, of branding versus performance, new solutions that have come to the fore in the last few months that you'll be willing to experiment with. So to the degree that this is not confidential, some comments on you on Coca-Cola's next 6 months, or in discussion with colleagues of yours in advertiser fora, the advertiser perspective for the next 6 months. I think that will be of huge interest to our audience. Barbara.
So again, it's a very tough question, this one, because it's very much dependent on what will happen in the very next weeks in terms of reopening of our main channels, that is the away from home. So we are very much linked to bars, restaurants, tourism as well, especially in this season. But let me say that, first of all, and going back to your point about the flexibility and the agility of the channel, it's absolutely true. In fact, in our decision, very bold decision to say, no, we do not have any relevant message, or we prefer to act in this moment than to talk, we never closed each single moment or day our social channels. And so we are still we always communicated with our consumers during all these phases. And because again, it works, and we could adjust really very quickly also our messages or our communications based on the sentiment of the consumers. In terms of what's next, of course, this decision of being dark is no more. Is not sustainable in a long term, and especially now that again our customers are going back to be active on top of the modern trade, and so we are going to kick off again our communication very soon, keeping in mind that for us the two new mantra are two words: agility and flexibility, because we will continue to invest for sure, but it will be essential to listen on a daily basis of what the markets, the clients, the customers, the consumers are telling us, and immediately adjust our spending to what really matters in a specific moment. So recently I attended a seminar and someone used the expression moment marketing. I think that never like before, it's really about this, so moment marketing. So to be flexible enough to react in real time to what is really needed by the market. And I also think that we will need to readjust in a way the model, the business model, the way we are working with our agencies, but also with the media owners, because in the same direction, of the direction of the flexibility and the adaptability. And we are working on this also together with our partners, because if there is a positive in these horrible situations that we went through, is that we learned, at least as a company, about not only we accelerated digitalization as probably all the companies in these last 3 months, but we always, we now know that agility and flexibility could pay back a lot if properly managed.
I think the point you make about moment marketing reflects the agility and flexibility of digital. So we as an industry can only be optimistic. It also answers one of the questions we have from the audience about the deployment of new technologies to offer immersive experiences. This certainly is bound to be the case. Daniel K., a comment on what Daniel has said, and also, if you may, a very short comment, because I was, as expected, your projection about non-social display going very well, and not only social, right now and in the near future has intrigued a lot of interest. So short comment on Barbara's statement and a clarification on why and how do you see non-social display growth being so dynamic in the near future?
I think there was actually an interesting connection between what Barbara said and what Ian said. So Barbara about the agility and the moment marketing, and Ian about the rapid consumer changes. And those two things really go together. I've been quite intrigued to figure out how long-term will the consumption changes that we're currently seeing with consumers, how long will they be? Is it going to be more like a New Year's resolution where things go back to normal in a couple of months? There was, when I was actually browsing through this, there was an article in the New York Times from the 2009 recession, which looked at, do recessions or traumatic economic experiences, do they trigger long-term behavioral change? And past experience shows not really, but then if you are younger, it might, if it's in your formative phase of growing up, it might well be. However, of course, right now we're in a situation that is not really comparable. So, but if we look, for instance, at connected TV consumption, which was through the roof in April, which kind of went down a little bit again now week over week, but settled at a higher level. So first indicators, and it's only a hypothesis, is that we'll see a continuation of the consumer trends we're seeing now, albeit at a less excessive level than what we have recorded in April. That's a great foundation for businesses to address consumers differently, for business to continue digital transformation, because this seed has been planted away from this incrementalism of change to something more sudden. And here's also what Daniel said, Daniel Bischoff said, where that comes in. We've seen this recovery of really performance-based formats extremely quickly, or hardly declining at all. Now, video, with consumers being more digital, video is going to be a key driver for brand advertising, and it's going to be more important to have this premium video. This is backed up by our data. So we saw in the last couple of years premium inventory not growing very fast at the expense of outstream inventory. But there's only so much premium available in the outstream space. And now we're seeing not a reversal of that trend, but a stronger growth of in-stream. For instance, broadcasters make more inventory available, but also as advertisers are becoming more choosy when it comes to the quality of the video environment in which they advertise.
I'd like to move on with a question for Daniel B. And Ian. Now, we heard about the orientation of brands in the near term. Now, both you, Ian, as a platform, and you, Daniel B., as a major content provider, a giant broadcaster in Europe, have been innovating in the last few months continuously to address the new demands from brands and also the challenges of the new environment. So if you could, each one from his own perspective, highlight a couple of innovations that you've put forward recently and that you think are critical for the way the market is going to evolve in the near term. We would very much like to hear them. I'll start with Daniel B.
Thanks, Constantine. If I may, I'll just go back to quickly what Ba said, because I think it's very important point that she mentioned here. And starting with the fact that it is a real dilemma for advertisers how to behave in this situation at the moment. And Coke took a bold decision to go this way. But this moment marketing has a lot of, let's say, implications further down the value chain that I just want to touch quickly, because in this day and age where people are locked at home, what we see from a broadcast and media company perspective is they're looking for quality journalism to tend to when looking for information, right? And advertisement is a key, if not the key pillar to fund quality, transparent journalism, and also great content. So for us, being a major media company and content creator, it is a difficult time because we want to support and give orientation to consumers through great journalism and quality journalism. And on the other hand, we want to create great content, right, for the years to come. So you're talking about innovation. So what we're looking at the moment is definitely ease of access to the inventory and to the great content that we offer. So we launched a platform called VNP Connect, which offers advertisers easier programmatic access to all the quality video inventory that we have across Europe. But we're also definitely looking at how can we innovate in the content production area, because as you can imagine, it's not only consumers being locked at home, but if you look at the great big shows that we are producing and the content, it's difficult to do that at this point, right? And we're going to see a major impact on that area in the years to come, because now is the time to produce the content for the next year. So when talking about innovation in our area, it's really about ease of access, technology in a very pragmatic and direct way, talking about advertisement, but also at the beginning, the nutshell of what we do, the core, the content creation. We're looking into how can we create content in an innovative way in this day and age that is engaging and that will attract the attention of consumers next year and the year after.
Thank you, Daniel. Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen over the last 10 weeks or so just a huge amount of innovation. And actually, I'll tie it back to the question we had around immersive experiences. I think one of the biggest trends that we've seen is on our platform is people going live on the platform and brands tapping into that as an opportunity. So reimagining what they would do with live in-person events, which obviously are not possible. And we've seen everything from live catwalk shows from the models in their own homes showing the new fashion designs, concerts, and that ability to go live and create an immersive experience to actually a much larger audience than you've been able to do physically. And one that just jumped out to me was Defective Records. Took all of their live shows that they would do and made a virtual festival. And every Friday, they're getting 2 million people connecting to have an immersive digital experience and bringing a huge community together, and clearly something much bigger than they could have done before with an in-person immersive experience.
No, that's absolutely correct. And if you like, in a way, Interact this year with close to 1,000 people attending is in many, many ways the equivalent of a broader virtual community. We've never had 1,000 attendees at Interact yet. We had several hundreds, but not 1,000. No, but that's true. I'm conscious of time because I'm already getting comments from the organizers about Greek timekeeping. It's the national stereotypes that will never leave us. So I would just want a final comment from you all in terms of what key actions do you think our industry should be taking to mitigate the risks of this epoch and to accelerate our return to growth and our path to recovery. So if there are one or two actions that you think are absolutely key, and I will start with Barbara.
I will build on Jan's comment because I think that this, and also Daniel B comments, because it's absolutely true that to go back to be effective in advertising, we also need great content. Not only content to be produced by us, but also content to be produced by the industry. And I think that one of the main challenge for us will be to find a new way to create great content that create really experience. Because again, on Jan's point, we really learned a lot about this, concert or shows, DJ set, many different, even entertainment show produced in real time, in go live, with many contributions of people working from home or playing and acting from home and so on and so forth. And so I think that all this area of content creations, ADV, but also content will be key and fundamental for us in the coming months.
Before I move on to Daniel B, you all must have seen a new poll that has come up of when do you think we will see recovery in digital advertising, and 4 options. So please, as we speak, do submit your reply, and I'll be happy to announce the result in a minute or two. So, Daniel B., back to you. 1 or 2 key actions we need to take as an industry to accelerate recovery.
I think we need to understand the broader implications of what is happening, and to really dissect what is structural in consumer behavior in terms of media usage, but also consumption and spends. And on the other hand, what is let's say, an immediate impact. From our point of view, we believe that the big topics that have been there before this crisis will remain and will be amplified. And those topics are in digital, brand safety, our ad fraud, our high quality premium content that advertisers are looking for. So this is what we are going to push through this crisis and after this crisis as best as possible, in order to make sure that the advertising euros and pounds and dollars that are being spent are spent in the right context and reaching the right audiences. In order to do so, we need to create content. That's the only way. That's our core job, is to create content that engages with people and that captures attention. And this crisis actually helped us in that area quite a bit, because we got a lot of attention from consumers. We got a lot of screen time and also TV time from consumers to not only educate, but to get in touch with them. So the content creation, focus on transparency, on quality premium content, and ease of access into that inventory. That's the key 3 pillars for us.
Thank you, Daniel. Ian.
Yeah, I just with a brief thought really, and I think just it's a mindset actually, and I think for advertisers to understand that this is a pandemic and not a brief, it's not an opportunity. How can we be genuinely helpful to consumers and help brands connect to consumers in new and meaningful ways, and help businesses make this pivot towards a more online world as we go forward, I think would be my key advice.
Thank you, Ian. And a final comment from you, Daniel K.
I don't have much to add. I think Barbara, Ian, and Daniel B. summarized it perfectly. One thing I would add is we need to watch out that the recovery will be as evenly distributed as possible for media, that we don't have a differential recovery for some media and other. I think there might be an implication for media pluralism. And the other is, I think there's always this gap in the ad industry between talk of innovation and practice of innovation. And maybe, being self-critical here, the ad industry is the one where the gulf between talk and action is the widest. And I think, or one of the widest. And I think we now have the historic opportunity to not just talk innovation, but really do things differently. We've seen in this crisis that we do not have to be stuck in ways of digital being incremental, little by little change, but that we can have, but that we can make a big impact by being bold. And I just wish that the industry continues with that mindset in the future.
I couldn't have put it better myself. And in terms of the poll result, 11% see recovery in Q3 2020, 43% Q4 2020, 26% Q1 2021, and the arch pessimists, 20% Q2 2021. So there is a consensus, which is 3 out of 4 think that the recovery will be either at the end of this year or early next. We might say that this may be a consensus in the room. I would like to thank most warmly again our panelists, Barbara, Daniel B., Daniel K., and Ian, for their insights and valuable knowledge in this quite challenging time. And I need to also highlight that our ADEX benchmark survey is available to download from the IAB Europe website. A lot of you have posed questions online about the source of the data. You will be able to see more there, and of course, needless to say, our team are standby to address further questions. At our site, you will also find, besides the ADEX benchmark study, a few recent studies we have done on diverse topics that IAB Europe covers. It's been a very active few months for us, so please take the time to visit our site and see more.